For the survivors, written by her sunk. Sir, the interference has been cleared. We're ready for vigil. On screen, Adjutant, the captain said. The display flickered. As the image cleared, every eye on the bridge looked, unable to fully comprehend what they were all seeing. They held their breaths. No one spoke. Only the ever-present humming of the distant engine spun in the eerie silence. The captain rose slowly. Yes! It was enormous. The scale of the thing was unimaginable, unmatched in size. The rays of white dwarf star shone on the hull of the floating structure. Its faded metal reflected dully but imposing. The twisted yet unfamiliar architecture spoke to her deeply. The captain broke the awed silence. How far away, Adjutant? 4 hours and 17 minutes, sir. He answered, and several breaths around the room that had been silently relieved, the buzz withdrawed again. The captain didn't turn away from the screen. The view outside threatened to swallow them all, and it was still so far away, like a smaller planet, locked in place. Composition of the hull? She asked, and was met with silence. She turned, and the technology officer shook his head. Unknown, sir. Unknown what? The probe returns unknown values. It can't discern the properties of the alloy, except that it is some sort of metal, he continued. No energy signatures. The structure is indiscernible from background static, the officer said, and both looked back at the enormity. It's anything but indiscernible. Bring us in, navigator. Yes, sir. It was a breach in the first meeting protocol, but no one argued against her decision. Maybe they all felt the strange attraction to the structure, felt pulled towards it. A faded spark of instinctual subconscious memory, perhaps. Here, in the deep dark of the southern spiral, hidden in the thickest asteroid belt they ever navigated, it was found. Only a flicker of metal had alerted the scouting probe of its existence. They found a small, in comparison, opening in the dull metal that turned out to be a docking bay. The bay was comically small compared to the structure. Their ship fit, but another would be hard-pressed to also dock. An hour later, and after the scouting probes made all the clear, the captain and a designated squad made their way to the floor of the hangar. A dull thud when they sat down with their gravity boots activated. It was eerie. No life forms, or wear and tear, no dust or debris, pristine floors and ceiling. The unknown metal was unadorned, a stark contrast to all other stations they'd visited in all their years as an exploration vessel. Murals, banners, and emblems from a myriad of species they had met were the standard. But this was empty, a blank slate, or deserted. They pushed on and came upon a narrow corridor. Walking warily through it, 2 flanking pulse guards in front, the captain and a science officer made up the middle, with 2 other pulse guards covering the back. There was a very brief feeling of a pull from all of them, and they were suddenly at the end of the corridor. The captain looked back in shock. She saw an endless corridor from where they came. What just happened, Adjutant? She asked, and the science officer looked at his arm scanner and checked several readings. Some sort of short-distance teleportation, sir. Still in the same corridor, while we seem to have traversed about 3 miles in a straight line. No neutrino drain or radiation present. Stay vigilant. I suspect this wasn't the last trick we'll encounter. At the end of the corridor was a vaulted door, covered in thick bars of the same strange alloy. They approached cautiously. No handle. No lock. Any sign of... she began, and suddenly the corridor behind them closed off with a soft clunk, a solid wall appearing in its place. The pulse guards went into high alert, and no sooner had they moved into defensive positions when scanning rays moved up and down the room. Then a clear robotic voice stated softly, "Access granted." The door opened up with a surprising gust of air. It had taken only a few seconds, and several moments passed in silence. After checking the readings, the science officer gave the okay to remove their helmets. The air was fresh and clear. The captain gave the order, and they made their way into the room. A gasp escaped the officer, and the captain had to restrain herself to not do the same thing. The room was enormous. A vast space, circular and barely perceptible ceiling, floor the same pristine metal, but the walls were covered in discs from top to bottom, all of them facing the middle. In the middle of the room was a small raised platform, and beyond it, covered half in the radius of the room, was a spherical structure on another platform, like a bubble raising up from the floor. Its surface shimmered and waved on the top of black, liquid-transparent metal. Something shone, purple light, from inside it, but the swirling metal blocked it from a clear view. They approached slowly, The pulse guards in their defensive positions around the captain and officers. The science officer looked up in awe. Then the swirling spheres let out a ferocious grinding noise, the metal extending several dozen meters in gross spike, undulating. Then it retracted as suddenly, and the sphere returned to normal. The captain asked when the ringing in the eyes ceased. "It is the end, dear captain," from the other side of the sphere. The voice materialized into a bipedal creature, male, wearing simple clothes, walking into their view. The pulse guards aimed, and the creature stopped, with what the captain assumed was a bemused expression. From the floor panels around them, dozens of turrets rose up with absolute precision surrounding them. "I bear no hostile intent, Captain, though I would advise your guards to lower their weapons. Their station is very protective." "So are my guards, and we have no hostile intent either." The captain ordered the guards to stand down, and so did the turrets. The creatures seemed honest, and it spoke their language perfectly, though that could just be an advanced translator software. "We are the Telosians, the exploration vessel Dauntless. Tell me, stranger, who are you, and what is this place?" "The first answer is shorter story than the second. I am Quincy, no last name. You could say that I am a warden of this place, and I already know your name, Captain Narrated, and the purpose of your ship. How? My scanners picked up your ship when you entered the system. The rest was trivial. I'm sorry for the intrusion, of course, but necessity demands my prudence." "Why is that, Mr. Quincy, no last name?" Dura-Denok said, hiding her surprise. Quincy smiled wildly. Whatever equipment the station was equipped with must be very advanced to scan them so thoroughly without their systems picking it up. "That leads us nicely to the second answer." He walked closer to them and gestured to the massive sphere in front of them. "Because of this, Captain," he said. "The sphere?" "Rather, the thing that is inside the sphere. You see, all of this is a prison, and the thing inside the sphere is a prisoner. And vice versa, I reckon," Quincy said before Dara-Denok could ask another question. He continued, "Ages ago, several thousands of, any number I use wouldn't make sense to you. A very long time ago, the galaxy was thriving, much more than now. Boundless growth, no lack of resources, incredible technological advancements. Countless of species working together. Actual peace. Then this thing appeared," he said, gesturing to the sphere. Several holograms or screens appeared around them, showing feeds and news and images of the thing, blurry but unmistakably horrible. One of the pulse guards stretched. "This thing devoured. In the absolute sense, it tore through planets within moments, leaving nothing but ash and dust. It began as just some obscure horror story in the feeds, but then it began to move into more populated areas of the galaxy. And it grew, always hungering for organics." The hologram screen showed his story in images and feeds. The thing, the devouring mass, was as big as a planet, and only grew from there as time went on. "Nothing could stop it. The United Republic threw everything they had at it. Yet it kept coming, kept devouring. It was relatively slow-moving, but inexorable. The planets and systems on its route, horrible planning. Evacuation was, of course, high priority, but a whole planet of inhabitants, it was impossible at the time. So much loss, and horrible desperation." Quincy stopped and looked at the sphere. It smiked again twice, then the containment reasserted itself. "In too short a time, most population centers were gone, and the United Federation in shambles. And the thing was still moving to the next target. Hope rapidly dwindled. But we, my species that is, worked on a potential solution. We figured if it devoured, then it probably had to process it somehow. And, long story short, a plan was formulated. A plague, a virus so virulent, even this thing would be affected. Our home planet was next on the horrible thing's course. So, the call went out for volunteers." A slight pause as the science officer let out a slight teary gasp. Quincy smiled warmly at him. It's okay. It was our decision. The goal was answered. By the billions, we just, all of us, had enough of all the loss. All those deaths. If we could stop it, we had to. For the survivors, when the time came, as this thing barreled into our doorstep, the virus was deployed on the surface. And in each of the millions of ships waiting in orbit, as it opened its maw, we let loose a final cry of defiance. A loud cry for the thing to, pardon my rudeness, go fuck itself. Then we were gone into the maw of gluttony. At first it seemed to have no effect, he continued. Then it stopped for the first time since discovery, and for years it tore and flailed. The remnants of our planet and the neighboring planets torn to chunks in its primal rage. It grew smaller and smaller, but it still raged, hungry. The few survivors of our species, me included, that hadn't reached our planet in time, set out to quarantine the system and build this station that you find, because the mass was slowly repairing itself, it seemed. So we built this prison, this tomb, the perpetual coffin of the devourer, and ours with a hammer and nails. Silence grew until the captain spoke in solemnity. I don't know what to say. Nowhere does this event appear in our history feeds. No, it wouldn't. Before stealing the station, we made each of the remaining species promise to purge their records of the event. It had to be a fresh start for the galaxy. Most technology had been lost by that time, so in many ways it was a new start. And, most of all, we wanted to be forgotten. To not be spoken about in fear someone would seek us out and interrupt our containment. The captain felt her antennas twitch. We have no interest to interrupt it, Quincy smiled warmly. Don't worry, I believe you. Your service record shows as much, and you remind me of one of the surviving species. I'm glad they made it, he said, and took a breath after a short silence. The captain could by now discern more of Quincy's features and grimaces. He was tired, heavy-set eyelids. Truthfully, it has been a very long time since we had a visitor. Please, would you mind telling me about, well, your goals, your history, he asked, the smile returning. He gestured to a table that had assembled itself a bit away. On the table was a bowl of their home planet local Dronov tea, the leaves filling the vicinity with its delectable and fantastic aroma. The fabricator is done, and it smells good. Mind if we sit, talk, and drink? I've heard good things about your tea. Reticence at first, then the captain, science officer, and half the pulse guards and ships joined Quincy at the table. They talked for hours, Quincy joyfully asking about everything he could think of about their species' history, and each of the individual members of the squad's history and ambitions. At the third hour, they were done and standing in the hallway again, away from the sphere. Quincy thanked them warmly. Before they left, the captain asked the following. What was your species called? We called ourselves humans, he answered after a little while. I know you don't want to be remembered, but we cannot let your sacrifice lurk in emptiness, Quincy the human. Quincy sighed and looked at the captain with a bemused resignation. I figured this would be the way of things, but I don't regret our time together. Thank you for the company. It warms an old man's heart to hear the tales of the young, and I am sorry. Sorry for what? What was that, Captain? Captain Duridanok sat at her seat in the navigation center as usual. She looked up at her adjutant, who had asked the question. What? The engines have given the all-clear for warp, sir. Did the scanners pick up anything in the debris field? She asked the science officer, and looked out the viewport. A massive asteroid field surrounding the white dwarf star. Beautiful, sure, but boring. Nothing at all, sir. No valuable metals or resources. Just the remnants of several desolate planets, primarily rock and basic components. No sign of organic life. Mark that in the Expedition Feed Class F system, and, go to warp. Yes, sir, was the answer, and the exploration ship of the United Galaxy Federation, the Dauntless, captained by Ferry Diridanok of the Terrorosian community, went into warp to continue their exploration into the unknown. In the hidden station, Quincy stood at the dock in the open space, watching the distant warp trails dissipate into the vacuum. Memory purge completed, an artificial voice rang out in his mind. Then his hologram dissipated. The sphere skidded and struggled once more, the last time for many ages to come. Deep inside the station, in an underground vault, the real Quincy lay in his stasis pod, preparing to immerse again. He shared the information from their visitors in their collective memory bank for the next awakened in line to peruse, at the next unplanned visit. He gave himself a few minutes to read through it, and then spent a while reading about the previous visitor with a smile. They were getting better at detection, and technology was fast improving. Soon they might surpass our tech and find a way. His smile faded. He took a deep breath and plugged himself in. Viscous liquid filled the pod. "Do it," he told the station, and it activated the virus in his system. He clenched his teeth, then screamed. It was muffled by the thick glass and the liquid. His muscles tore apart, and were it not for the immersion of extreme regeneration fluids, he would have ruptured within a few minutes. After the virus was mixed with his human blood, it was leached into the tubes and went up to that horrible sphere. The mass inside the sphere twisted and flailed ineffectively. The last thought he had going into stasis was a simple but loud sentence to the great big monster in the sphere. His thoughts spiraled out from either of his mind, out of the pod, and out over thousands of other pods, out over the massive station, and finally out in the vast void of hopeful futures, to ring out with billions of others in the past. For the survivors. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.